about the Charlie Russell?
Oh yes, my dad, he was a deputy at the Dempsey Gibbons fight in Shelby, did they say? Yes. And that was a big highlight of his life. And Marcos put out a calendar with a picture of these. And they would stop at night and build bonfire and tell stories. And Charlie Russell came. Dad said, I sat right beside him. He had a handle of clay, and he just carry on. He said, you watch, and here was this beautiful buffalo head. He said, then he go, and he said, oh, but it just kept one of them. Yeah, and he said he told stories, and that's what they did in the evenings. Everybody told stories, and he said he was a great storyteller. He must have been quite a guy, man's man, you know, because he just loved that. He would come out there every night. He didn't travel with them because they were actually went by horseback up there. And my dad loved that story too. And they gave him a card that he was this deputy at this Dempsey Gibbons fight. Well, he also was a 50-year member of the American Legion. He had that in there. But now you got to understand, Dad was wise about money. He had his Western shirt on, and he had his money up here, and this was clipped. But he had a little card that he kept those two things in his back pocket. Well, when we lived in New York, my husband took my dad down. What was that race? Where Secretariat. And he took him down there. For fun, my husband, a great big guy, you know, he's about 6'5", and he'd take a dad, and Dad's dressed all Western. He looked really good in stuff, with a good hat and dress. And everybody's watching him, of course, but Stretch took him down on the subways, and he did everything to get where they were going out. I think it was out on, they had to go, I think, on a boat even, but it was quite a big trip. Dad didn't feel very good, but he wanted to go see that deal. And he said, I know just when it happened, somebody bumped him. And they stole his card, not his money, but they got his card with all that stuff, and that just broke his heart that somebody actually stole his little wallet thing. He didn't have any money in it, but all those things meant so much to him. He liked the American Legion. That was very important. And he was commander a couple times, you know, and he just loved it. And he wanted to go when World War II came. I can remember that. Oh, it was a shocking thing, you know. Oh, everybody was scared. And I think we were just starting school. It was 1940 when it really started up, and that was the year we started school. And then when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, I can remember my dad at the radio, and they would always get real close, and he had that on, and he wasn't going to miss a thing. Roosevelt said he loved Roosevelt. And I was tumbling, I kind of remember, behind him and laughing and talking, and he turned around, and the loudest I've ever heard anybody, he yelled, shut up. You're going to miss Roosevelt, see. My dad never yelled at me. It scared me so bad. My mother said, no, Peggy, he's very worried, and she'd soothe over this thing, you know, got it over with. Well, that's the beginning of the war as far as I was concerned, because I didn't have anyone in the war to worry about. You'd see little things, a poster at the post office scare you with a big swastika on it. I got worried about that a little bit. But I wasn't affected. But the day the war was over, my dad opened the bar, and he put any liquor he had, and he got any liquor he had anywhere, and he was out on the bar, and everything was free. Well, people that would never take a drink were in there. Everybody was in the hotel that day. The school teachers were, I can remember them laughing about it, pouring drinks. And and my dad was staggering. He was not a drinker, you know. And I said, what is going wrong here? And my mother said, now, Peggy, that war's over, and your dad's quite excited, and, you know, and everybody's having fun. Everybody in town was there, and nobody walking very straight. I remember that to me, so I said, they talk about when the war started and where it ended. I have two memories. Is that a funny thing? And my dad yelling his head off, scaring me to death when it started. and getting kind of crazy, you know, when it was over with. Everybody, and everybody was so patriotic. You know, we had tires, but we didn't even have a spare tire. It didn't go to Glasgow very fast. We went 35 miles an hour, never any faster. And my brother and I fought all the way, so the slower you went, the more fights we had. But it was gas. If you see it burn gas, you'd go faster than 35, and he did not go faster than 35. They saved everything. They saved, and Mr. Daly is our superintendent, and he dished out the stamps. That was a big deal. Everybody gets stamps. They had little Joe Perry ran the pump house down here for the railroad, and little Joe was a little Italian fellow, and he only ate canned tomato soup. Well, you got stamps, you only got so many canned things you could have, and Joe was in a tough shape. He tried to argue with Mr. Daly. Well, Mr. Daly he didn't go to the service. He was Mormon. They didn't go to the service, and he really was feeling bad about this all the time. So my dad would try to pick up his spirits a little bit, so he'd send Joe, he said, just go on down there. If Daly wanted to, he could give you more stamps. Don't you just go ahead and just go tell him. I said, you know you get more stamps. Well, of course, he couldn't do that. And I'd tell Mr. Daly about it, and he laughed, and he said, yes, and he sent Bill Mix. Bill lived right across from the cemetery, and he dug graves. They dug them all by hand, and I don't think they ever called one off even in the winter, not to my knowledge. You know, that guy would go out there and dig those graves. And fun, a lot of things were, you know, I knew so many inside things, I suppose being in the hotel. You know everything that was going on in town and everything. But they would have wakes at the homes too, mainly the Catholics, if there was something going on. Is that a good enough story to tell about? Well, Mr. Jacobs died, and Mrs. Rudder wanted to send a cake down. Everybody would go down there, so Joanna and I were about 10 or 11, and we took the cake down there, and it was very cold. It was in the fall. And I can remember what I was wearing even yet. And Mrs. Jacobs would say, girls, come in. She grabbed us. I thought we were just going to give them the cake. Well, there was people all over in that place, all the, elderly people and all. So when we were if you just touched us, we'd giggle. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And she brought us into this other room. They had it set little lamps and everything, and there was the coffin and Mr. Jacobs. Come see Mr. Jacobs. I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd never seen anything like that, And I got Jo under the arm and got a hold of her. And she was a good little Catholic girl, and she kneeled and I kneeled, and we both, and I'll never forget it. We're right there, for two young girls. And when we got out of that place, I'll tell you, we ran fast as we could, and we laughed and laughed. It was all stress. We were just overstressed. And to see something that we heard about, but we'd never seen her, and had all those old people sitting there watching us. Everybody's got a bad face on, and we were it didn't take much, just give you a little poke and you break down laughing. And I suffered from that all my life. In high school, the big teacher, Mrs. Luck, said, Peggy, I'm going to give you a minute to go to the assembly and collect yourself. Somebody had said something, it tickled me to death. But I had a great life, a lot of fun, nothing. I used to wonder what people were unhappy about, You go driving around and learn to drive. I got an old car, and beat up old. It was a Pontiac, about a 29 Pontiac. And we'd always lived in the hotel. Well, when we moved out there, then I was stuck for a ride to get to school. There was no bus then. So my dad bought this car, and he'd had a nice yellow convertible. He thought it was a pretty thing. He red leather seats and beautiful. And I come walking up the street from school, and there my folks sitting in this old car grinning, and I said, well, where'd you get this old wreck? And my mother said, well, he bought it for you. And I said, for me? It's beautiful. I was sure tickled. I thought that was a good car. Well, did we have fun the next few years with that car? You could see the inner tubes. you know, the old tires, we didn't go very fast, but you needed a good new set of tires. Eventually I got them, but one didn't have trouble. When you're young like that, we could get some guy to stop and help us, you know, get our tire changed. But it was a Pontiac, and the lug nuts were opposite. They ran backwards for some reason I don't understand, but a lot of guys had trouble getting those tires changed for us while we waited. Isn't that funny? One night we were going home. I never did know how to change a tire. We're in this Cadillac driving along, and not Cadillac, Dad's Mercury convertible, and my mother, she's never crazy about it, but she was cold. And I said, you know, Dad, he said, you ever learned to change a tire? And I said, well, no, I never did, but I'm just waiting. You know, I said, if I could have one, you know, when you're along, if I, you know, so you could show me how to do it. I am not kidding you. Thump, 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 thump. There we were. It was cold, and you know how it can get here in this, it was convertible, never warm anyway. And there we sat. And my mother said, well, and Dad said, you want to learn now? Let's get out and let's do it. And we had to do it. It was out right by the bridge there. And I said, oh, it's too cold. I said, no, you want to now, just come on, get out. And my mother said, it's your fault. She really believed. Never did. To this day, I think she still believed it was my fault, because I said, well, you never have one when I'm along. And it happened. So we got out, we got her changed, but I got the devil, you know, to pay to get that tire changed. Never. I don't think I ever did change one on that other old car we had, but I don't know that I ever, I'm not going to brag about it, but I never had too much trouble with tires in my life. But I do know that there was some complaining that the lug nuts were, why would they opposite? The opposite of what you'd figure they were going to be, and this was a Pontiac. Kind of a question, isn't it? But that was to drive to school every day. They didn't have a bus then. I think they may have had a bus drive down the highway, but we were off maybe 4 or 5 miles off the highway, so I drove. But I was a sophomore in high school, junior maybe by the time I got my car. So I just drove every day. Spent some time in the ditch too. Mr. Black was between our house and the road. He a lot of times got me out. But one day I came around the corner, and a little too fast probably, and John Black was coming the other way. His cigar or cigarette, I think his cigar fell out of his mouth. I saw it happen. It scared him so bad. And his 2 little boys, their mother had passed away, and these 2 little boys be waiting to go. They're walking up to the bus. And I stopped, come on you guys, you want to go? And they rode once, and then the next time I called, the older boy says, my dad said we're not supposed to ride with you. And what's the little boy that's Billy, I said, come on Billy, you want to go? Sure. Billy got in. His brother wouldn't do it, so he was a rebel from early on, and I'd drive him to school. So one day I stopped, and he's standing there. God, he was the cutest kid. And he had a great big white dirty cat. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, we're going to have show and tell today. I'm taking my cat. Now this cat was not a house cat. This maybe was a barn cat or something. But I'm too dumb to know that's not such a good deal. So he got in, and we started up the car. Well, let me tell you, that cat weaved, you might say, around in a circle. Times he went all over that car and scared him so bad. And so I opened it up, and Billy said, I don't think we better take her. The cat went crazy in the car, and he just made a mess. So I didn't always get the best of taking Billy to school. He was a cute little boy, but and that had been Black's house out there. They'd owned that place, and they were raising sugar beets at the time when Dad bought it. But then they quit. I don't know what that deal was. Why everybody tried sugar beets.
Well, I know that there used to be a plant in Chinook that you could take them to, and they would process them
They
here
used
and
to
ship them
put
out.
them here, the piles, great piles. But they had to hire people to come in, and mostly those people below the border there, and they lived in granaries, and it was not a good situation. But the big families, and they'd have their wives and kids and the whole business. But I only remember 1 year that we had it, and then Dad raised hay. He liked hay and cattle. He liked Black Angus before he ever had them. You know, he had Black Angus cattle. But I always wished, to tell you the truth, that I just bought the hotel myself or let him give me the hotel. That was home to me. You know, it was just in the midst of everything, and I liked the whole thing. Can you imagine your house just filled with everybody on Saturday? All the women were visiting, and you know, and it was just a great place to live. It was interesting and fun, and my mother let me have a lot of leeway to do things and wear what I want to wear, and you know, have a company come. Joe liked to come over. We could go upstairs and we'd pick out a room and spend the night in the different rooms, and then she could eat with me, and that was fun for her. And I ate at their house half the time because it was home cooking, you know. So I was down at Joe, and she wasn't be giggling and carrying on at the table. So I had to sit by Stubbs, and he was pretty rigid. And Joe would go out in the kitchen. They had a swinging door, and then she'd peek out through that door, and then I'd get a fit of giggles. And she had 4 daughters of her own, but you know, that's the sweetest woman. I just loved her. And I was there half the time. I was always knocking. They'd be doing things and saying little prayers, and they were strong Catholic. And she'd come on in, Peggy. I was there half the time. Isn't that funny? And I get that. A lot of little old ladies I visited a lot. And there's the Ole Johnson and his wife had that little place. She died quite early, but I would go down there a lot, and she made homemade bread, and he grew honeybees and raised honeybees, and so I did homemade bread and honeybees and with honey on it, and I loved it. And she was so sweet to me. And one of the granddaughters said, well, you'd get your hair done. She would braid my hair, so I guess, I don't remember that part of it, but she would braid my hair. I had real long hair, and I was kind of a brat about it, and raised a lot of canes, so I needed somebody to take their time to do it. My mother was busy. And I love that. And that's the funny thing, you know, as happy as you are with meeting these people and knowing them, as I grew older, went by there all the time when I was in high school, and I never stopped. You know, and that kind of just bothers me. Why they would have loved to have company. They're older, you know, but after I was married, I came back one time and they had a fire there. So my mother said, let's go, they put a lot of water, how they do sometimes. And she was a sweet, sweet little Norwegian woman, just the sweetest. And all her things were wet, you know, and stuff. And so Dad opened up the Windhorn store and put a lot of ropes up there. And we hung all her stuff, hung it up. But in the meantime, the wall was burnt, part of the curtain, and there was little curtains on the kitchen. And my mother said, come here, Peggy, and look. And here was my wedding picture cut out of the newspaper with a little straight pin on it hanging in that curtain. And it almost, and now where was I all those years I was in high school, didn't I stop and see how she was and stuff. But I have such good memories of a lot of people like that. I was a talker, and I loved to go around and visit everybody and see what was going on, and I was used to it because I was in the hotel. I wasn't shy, you know, knew too much, and of course they all probably got a bang out of that. And I'd go to Sunday school a lot of times, and you know who was so sweet to me? Darlene. I wanted to stop and see Darlene Jones. She was from Nelson then. And her mother was just a sweet, sweet woman, and she would talk to me. And I would tell her all kinds of stories that were going on there, and I suppose she got a bang out of that. I can remember some of the things I said, and oh gosh, but I was not a shy kid. You could get anything out of me, you know, tell different things that were going on. But you try to remember. I tried to remember what happened to the bandstand. And we were different things like that. Well, we played over there on that bandstand. It was great. It was falling down at that time, and you could get underneath it, and there's, you know, to climb on all that stuff. And Maxine McElvain said to me, well, she said her folks were Republican, the Joneses were Republican, and they had put a lot of signs up. She said, Peggy Denham and Joanne Rutter would go and we'd rip their signs off. Our folks were Democrats, they were for Roosevelt, you see, and these other people weren't for Roosevelt. She kids us, you know. And funny things, you think Mr. Western ran the store, and I'd say to my dad, I need some jump rope. I need a jump rope, Dad. He said, go get it from Fred. You know, he'd go tell Fred. I knew it was coming. So I go and say, Mr. Western, I need a jump rope. Well, I'll tell you what. We've got a lot here. He says, you come on in. He didn't have anything to do, and he was having a little fun. And there's this front, all this rope, every different size you ever wanted with a knot tied in it. And I said, where does that go? My God, it looks to me, China. He said, all comes up, that hole come right out of China. All that rope. So he said, well, what size do you want, Peggy? Well, I tried to think about it, and I thought, my God, some of us, you know, and I thought, that would never wear out. It wouldn't be, I'd be flipping it, and my gosh, I wonder if I want that kind. He said, well, let's see. And he'd take a piece of rope and he'd show me, and I said, oh, God, it seemed awfully big, heavy. So then he'd get a little skinny, and I wasn't sure I wanted that. And he just is having fun, I know now. It would take an hour or two, and I just mad at my dad because he wouldn't just get me a piece of jump rope. But Mr. Western put me through the ropes. And I finally get one that I liked, and they tie a knot for me in the end of each thing, and then I would be all set up.